Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also all smart TVs 2016 forward. Don't forget to subscribe to Candid Stanisci on YouTube. And, of course, now joining me is David Morassutti. David, how you doing, buddy?
Doing all right. We are in the final stretch run.
This is when all the marbles are up for grabs.
Yes, it is. Well, sorry, there's 0 marbles up for grabs. It's who's going to make the decision to rest and who's going to make the decision to play.
Win and you're in is coming up.
Exactly.
You know, that's just the way it works. We got some news. I got an email the other day from that talked about the Olympics now are including flag football. Now, we're going to have a guest next week talking specifically about this topic. I find that an amazing opportunity for the game of football.
Well, I think especially for the younger crowd, right? The younger generation and those who I was having a conversation, and this is somewhat related. I was having a conversation with someone who's a teacher at a high school and also coaches football. And he says, you have no idea sometimes how expensive it is and the burden it puts on schools and students to play this game. And so, obviously, flag football. Now, do I think flag football is going to replace touch football, like tackle football? No. Do I envision a scenario where the NFL and other leagues maybe look at this as a potential secondary option, right? A different type of league? I think so. And I think that's why you heard the NFL say, we'd love to see our players play in the Olympics, right? To have them on the world stage. You don't think even the CFL wouldn't let, this is where the CFL can shine a little bit and say, hey, we got some good players here too, especially those that are Canadian, right? So I'm excited for this. The Summer Olympics, there's not as many team sports like there, other than like soccer. Baseball's not really that big in the Olympics like like we've seen. Golf has tried to get back into the Olympics.
Tennis
has been a big one, but not everyone goes for the tennis, right?
A lot of the pool stuff is big, like all the different pool stuff.
Yeah, but it's individual, right? We don't get those full team events really as much.
Water
right?
polo.
It's not like in the Winter Olympics where you have hockey dominates. Well, when the NHLers went, you had hockey that would dominate the Winter Olympics, right? Curling would be a very big one too. Like the more team dynamic ones rather than just the individual sports. Yeah, I mean, I know that there's some team elements in the Summer Olympics, but this is in LA, right? This is in the United States. You don't think the the Olympics team in the US would want to have their best in LA for these Olympics? I think it's going to be a very interesting, it was viewed as a small thing and now it's kind of ballooned. And just to see also how prevalent flag football is, right? I'm sure a lot of parents would rather see their kids play flag football than tackle football nowadays.
Well, there's a correlation and a symbiotic relationship between lacrosse and football in Canada, the Canadian Football League and lacrosse. Both schedules coincide. Beginning is the end of another, the end is another beginning of the other. And so there's this rotation of CFL fans that are also lacrosse fans, NLL fans. Lacrosse is going into the Olympics, and they're not playing either of the games that people are accustomed to, standard field lacrosse or box lacrosse. So they're playing a hybrid version, of the sixes. So in football is the same thing. They're going to play a hybrid version of what we're accustomed to in the game of football, which is flag football. I don't know how the rules will play out in that, in that game, whatever that is. But what it does is it brings the game of football to the Olympics in whatever capacity it shows up. And I think what it does is it enhances um, being a football player. I mean, one thing about football and lacrosse, the same thing, because we've gone through the same situation. You don't wake up dreaming you're going to play football in the Olympics.
No,
This
for
is a
sure.
new dream. This is fresh. This is something that's just off the mark. And we'll see how it works out. But I think it's awesome. I mean, can you imagine, David? This is an opportunity to be in the Olympics for a football player, and it doesn't mean going into the bobsled like Lumsden. It doesn't talk about guys who go to track, right? This is actual football. The hands, the athleticism that football has to offer gets a chance to be seen on the same palette, if you will, of all these other sports. When we talk about speed, when we talk about agility, when we talk about athleticism, I mean, football has a lot of it that a lot of people are going to be surprised who aren't football fans when they watch that game, of which most of them will be outside of North America. There's a limited amount of people around the world who understand the game of football. They play once or twice in England, that kind of thing. They play in Mexico, they have a game there. But it's not really, really big. But I think it'll spark some interest in the game.
I think so too. Like it's going. There are countries that do have a football program, right? It's just obviously not to the level of what Canada and like Mexico's got a pretty good one now. It's not just the men. Let's not forget. There's also the women's side as well that has to be taken into account here. Mexico actually has a really good flag football women's team. So, but what it does, yeah, it gets more people involved with football in a way that maybe they never thought they could. Right? Not everyone can play tackle football. No one has the physical ability to do it. But flag football takes a totally different skill set to play.
Absolutely. Less physical, yes, but not any less athletic. In fact, I would suggest, and I would say that there's more of an opportunity for athleticism in the game, because there's going to be, that's the neat thing about flag football, is the athleticism where players put themselves in harm's way. There is no harm's way except for when they hit the ground. That's the athleticism where it's cut off. Everything else is in. Everything else is in. It's not about being, not that you're not brave playing flag football, but the level of bravery when you go to catch a ball is a lot less in flag football than it is in what we call football, regular football, whether it be Canadian Football League style or National Football League
Now,
style.
there's still dangers of playing flag football. They're like injuries are still a possibility, collisions and
Absolutely.
things like that. So it's not like it's 1,000% safer, but it is obviously going to have less of that concern of an injury, because of physical contact being taken out, right? So yeah, but yeah, I
And
think you're
and
right.
and David, how does that impact on the interest of parents putting their kids into football versus flag football?
Right? Like in Canada, we've seen a boom in kids that want to play basketball or soccer instead of hockey and football.
Well, you
Two
started at
reasons:
top with cost. Let's remember cost at the
cost,
beginning, and now we get to the rest. Now we're
cost,
talking about the rest of the story.
the amount of practice that's needed for hockey and football, and the limited resources to get ice and a field. Right? There's soccer's a little easier to manage. Football, I mean, basketball's a little easier to manage in that regard. So yeah, I do think that those
Football
are.
ends up on that playing field. It ends
I
up
think
there.
actually football,
Pair of shorts, and a grass field somewhere.
right? In football, you have to think about it. The helmet alone is the most important piece of equipment you can need. I heard that for a high school to get helmets, you're getting close to $30,000.
Wow.
Shoulder pads, knee pads, all these different equipment. The plastic doesn't last forever, so that has to be replaced eventually. The girdles, I heard that those, like, you can't reuse a girdle. Every kid has to have their own. Cleats, right? You need cleats. There's so much. I do know that's why, I can't remember which, there was an Argos player, and I think maybe Frank, you might have remembered too, who at the end of the year, if a guy was done with their cleats and they wanted to get rid of them, he would collect all the, I think it was Jamal Campbell, was collecting all the cleats into a bin and he would donate them. It was either Jamal Campbell or Alden Darby, one of those two, because they know there are kids that could use this. They could use having, you know, cleats that, are half decent, right? So I think it's so important for, you know, people to understand why flag football could be something that might be more, you know, more attractive for people nowadays rather than tackle football.
You can start with parents. I mean, it's a bit safer and it's a lot cheaper. And organizations that run flag football do not have the same kind of. You've emphasized and underlined the fact that they do not have as level of expense to do what they do. So, well, thank you, the Olympics. Los Angeles, being in North America and having been there a few times, the Olympics. This time they're really putting pressure on the Olympic organization to include North American sports, which is why football's in there, which is why lacrosse is in there. And there'll be other sports that I'm not aware of that are going to be taking part in the Olympics that didn't before. I think there's more pressure on them to put golf in it and more pressure to put baseball in it because of the North American aspect of these games. And the Olympics, we've learned over the years, they've gone through that. When they go to a country, that country has some input on the sports that that end up being part of it, that get injected, that respect the community that they're being played in. So that's all great, and it's great that we're getting a chance to see flag football, and it's going to be awesome. It's better than an all-star game, flag football, because they're playing for something. We've seen for many years now, the all-star football game is it's just a base. Let's get together and let's prove that we can run, catch, and do all that stuff. But this is a competition. It's going to be interesting to watch a competition with some of the football players that we all know as, big NFL players or big CFL players, and get a chance to see how they do against each other, in flag football. And it has the other advantage that hockey doesn't have, and that is that I don't know what kind of headgear they're going to wear, if they're going to be required to wear any headgear. But I have a feeling at least the personality of the players will come out a little more because there's less equipment that they're wearing. So that's fun.
Yeah, I know it is. It is fun, and I'm very curious to see how much of an interest this can get from top players. Right? Would
Yep.
you
I
know?
think the Olympics is a big attraction. It's
I do too. To
it's a
play for your
unicorn.
country means so much more than playing for a team. Like I think of the NBA. How many of the basketball players in the NBA decide, you know what, I want to play in the Olympics. I want to go for right. That's probably the best comparable in terms of a sport and its players. I forgot about basketball with the Summer Olympics. I was trying to
Yeah,
think.
I did. I said that. So
Think about that. Actually, how much do you think basketball is maybe a little concerned about football trying to get its name in there?
well,
Try.
there's definitely the issue where don't underestimate the penetration of basketball in the world community is very high, and the biggest example of that is China, and how the NBA has wooed China over the years. It's not something that baseball has done, not to my awareness, to the same level that basketball has. And football now is going to be a new thing that I truly believe that everybody's looking for a sport to play, and a lot of people like the idea of playing a new sport, and the opportunity to play the game and to learn about the game. For some who maybe, I'm tired of baseball, I'm tired of basketball. Oh, flag football, okay, and we can play outside. I like being outside, and that kind of stuff, because it becomes very inexpensive. Scheduling's a lot easier. I think it's easier to rent a field than it is to rent a stadium. So, or a football field, right? so they can they can make things happen. A lot of high schools, and
Well,
I don't know if it's going to be on turf or it's going to be on grass. I don't know.
mm,
That's
well, it depends on how many games they're going to be running at the same time.
I suspect
If
it'll be
it's going to be in LA, are they just going to run it out of if are they going to run it out of the stadium that the Chargers and the Rams are playing out of, which is one of the better stadiums in the NFL right now, one of the premier ones. So, yeah, I do think there's going to be a lot of interest in how that all kind of works out there.
Yeah, and the Olympics has accepted AstroTurf, fake grass. They've accepted it on various levels because it's something they can't help but do. So there was a time when they only had grass as their option. They've changed it a little bit. So okay, let's talk about the Canadian Football League, since that really is the reason why we're here.
Yep.
Um, you know, we look at the Canadian Football League and where they're at right now, and we have the Argos at 15-2. They're cemented into first. We have Montreal 10-7. They're in second. It looks like it'll be Hamilton in third with 8 wins. They'll be playing in Montreal, and then you have BC, and you have Winnipeg. Winnipeg in first, and it looks like it's going to be BC and Calgary. And I don't want to be BC after what happened in that last game. To know you're coming back against Calgary, a team that you helped gain a lot of confidence. So we know that Edmonton and Saskatchewan are out. Saskatchewan didn't take long to fall out, right? All of a sudden they're out. Like, they were in, and then they're not in. They're out. It happened so quickly. And how it happened was, I don't know. You want to talk about the collapse of the Saskatchewan Roughriders and a coach who stood up and said in the post game that it's my fault, took the blame.
He took the blame and lost his job.
Yep.
Right. I just think the writing was sort of on the wall for that team when they were in this spiral and they couldn't get out of it. Right. Again, second year in a row where that happens. And we talked about all the changes that they made in the offseason to go out, get a new quarterback, make some changes, and say, all right, we think we're ready to go. And then same thing again. And I think the big one too, and I think the writing was on the wall, not on the wall, but I think some concern from the Rough Rider standpoint. I don't think that game was sold out against the Argos too.
No.
Right? That's a concern. You can't. How many times have we talked about the community-owned teams needing the gate revenue? Right? That's how important it is. And I think they needed, and I don't think it was an unfair decision to fire Craig Dickinson because of how that season ended. But at the same time, it's interesting that they fired Dickinson, but then they give an extension to Jeremy O'Day.
Well, he gets another shot at hiring a coach.
Another shot at it. And my view is also his last shot at it, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely his last. He's not. They're going to have to, and I don't know what kind of leash the organization's going to have on him. Do they expect this team to do an about face next year? Is that what they expect? Is there a schedule for improvement? Is it a trend that goes for, being a good football team next year and then maybe the following year make the playoffs? Or are they, and I think they will be, this is what I think is in Saskatchewan, if it isn't the management team, it's definitely the fans. You show me what you're going to do, because I'm sick and tired of watching you guys play like this and be so real, literally, and I think it's a fair statement. I love Dickinson. I think he's a wonderful man. I think he's a great human being. Every time I've talked to him, he's always been a gentleman and a real good person. But we're not in the business of finding the best people to run a football team. We're here, and when I say we, I mean football in general. They're looking for, okay, what are your stats? Have you made the playoffs? Have you won a championship? Do you have a hope of winning a championship? That's what the fans base every decision on that they make in as far as liking a coach. And the same, unfortunately, now Jeremy O'Day is in the position where he has not re-signed him. He's been re-signed. And now the question is, what kind of clock is he on? And he's been around Saskatchewan for a while. I don't think he's in for a long time, but he's a well liked person in Saskatchewan.
He's been
So
there 26 years, right? He's been with that organization for so long. So yeah, there's a little bit of loyalty and a little familiarity there. But I think the big one for Dickinson, like I know people say he's a nice guy, but we have to kind of look past it. You can do both. You can have a good coach, but also a good person, right? The two shouldn't be seen as mutually exclusive. But
absolutely,
I think when you watch the way that game went for Saskatchewan, part of me thought they were going to win that game
sure looked like
because
it.
they were playing like a team that had nothing to lose. They were running the ball well. They were getting guys open in the
Big plays,
big plays. And
defensively,
then
offensively, special teams.
adjustments happened. Adjustments were made by the Argos, and they wouldn't make the adjustments. Saskatchewan couldn't. It was almost like they were, I don't want to say paralyzed by fear, but they were throwing all this stuff at them. They didn't know what to do. And to
Absolutely.
me, that's the sign of a team that frankly clearly just didn't have it, right? They just didn't have there's something in the water there that needs to be changed. So I wonder now how much change can we realistically expect from Jeremy O'Day, on top of the coaching change? Because you can't just change the coach and say, all right, we're gonna run it back. You're not getting the fans coming back. And this is the important thing. You have to sell the fans on we can get them back. We can get back to being a worthy competitive team, right? And so for me, when I watch that game, I say there's parts that work, but there's clearly parts that don't work. And yeah, I don't think coaching is going to be enough to get that team back to, on track.
They're going to need um, a little bit of luck in their future. Something a vein of luck they did not have, and that is at quarterback. They have had zero luck at quarterback over the past few years. They had a pretty good quarterback who unfortunately got injured, had a bad knee, and then just lost the faith of the organization, the fans, everybody. Ended up going to Montreal. He finished in second place there, and now he's going to play in a home game at the playoffs. As well as his coach, who was the quarterback's coach, the offensive coordinator there in Saskatchewan. Things are working out fine over in Montreal with a couple of key players from persons, whatever, from that team. So really, it's very possible that they could turn things around with a coach that gets the best out of his players. It just didn't happen for Dickinson in Saskatchewan this year. He did not get the best out of his players, and unfortunately, that's coaching. If players as a unit are not playing well, it's pretty much a pretty direct line to the coach, the management team, and the coach is the head management guy, right? Even more important or more in the line of fire than the GM. You know what I mean? Even though that might not be fair, it could be that it wasn't Dickinson's fault. It's O'Day's fault for not providing the right kind of players, a quarterback that was healthy, that could play well and lead the team to victory, a team that was disciplined and was able to show that in all three phases of the game that they could control a game, something they couldn't do. You don't lose 7 games in a row and have the three phases working at the same time. And that's what you need to have. And it wasn't happening. And it looked, you can blame players like a quarterback when they're throwing 5-6 interceptions. Then you're going, oh, that's too much. But, to throw a couple of interceptions here and there, to not be able to make passes, people dropping passes. Saskatchewan was notorious the last couple of years of having their receivers drop balls. So many drop balls. And we know, you and I both know that, we can see what a good team looks like. A good team doesn't drop balls. That's just the way it is.
A good team finds, I think, what did Ryan Dinwiddie say to us? Good teams find a way to win. Bad teams find excuses. If I might be paraphrasing, but like good teams just, you know what, even when you're not having a good game, you find a way. You just find a way. And I think that was something that this Saskatchewan team kind of lacked, right? It doesn't have to be pretty, but you have to put yourself in a position to say we want to get this done. We want to win. Nothing's going to keep us from winning. We might have a bad quarter. We might have a bad decision go against us, but we're going to find a way to pull it out. And unfortunately, they
Absolutely.
didn't have that.
Absolutely. And it really is it really is more than just the coach. It really is more than the head coach. We've seen because we follow Toronto more than any other team, we've had a close-up view of watching the creation, of a team, a championship team, needless to say. And we're starting to see a team that year after year, like Winnipeg, I don't live in Winnipeg, so I can't speak to I've seen a lot of the growth that Winnipeg has made. And I see a lot of parallels between them and the Argos. And it all starts with team unity and with players that can play together and that know how to win together. And if you don't have that's what makes great teams. They refuse to lose as a group. It doesn't matter why they need to catch up or why they need to play a great, I don't know, a great quarter or whatever. They find a way to win. And the Argos have that right now. They have a good coach, a coach that players seem to respect. They have a general manager that the world respects. So, being the Argos right now, they look like a good team, a really good team that could win a championship, just like Winnipeg. And I would say those two teams are there, Toronto and Winnipeg. We see that BC maybe we've seen too many chinks in their armor this year. No,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
right? They haven't been this at the same level of Winnipeg, not just by score, because not just by wins, but by the way they've played. From one game to another, they've played rather poorly a couple of times. That's something we can't say about Winnipeg or Toronto.
No, I agree. I agree, and that's really been the issue with the CFL is how much of a drop off there is with the top teams and the teams below. Like Calgary, I understand they've had some decent performances, but that's not a playoff team. Look at the record.
They could be a championship team. I mean, we're looking. I've been waiting to say this, David. Can you imagine? Can you imagine all those years that Calgary lost when they had 14-2 records, and they lost to 6-12 teams. They lost to Ottawa and Toronto. Toronto, a 500 team. Was it both times they were 500? Were they less than 500 one time? In 12 and 17, the Argos didn't have a fantastic record, and they turned around and won the Grey Cup. How ironic would it be if Calgary won a Grey Cup under these circumstances? They, talk about kismet. it'd be pretty amazing. So not that they're not a great team, David, but with football, any given Sunday, a team can win, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's the thing, right? Calgary can say, "Well, we have momentum on on our side. We just beat a team that nobody thought we were going to beat." And the other, not only momentum but health. My concern watching that Calgary BC game is what's Vernon Adams.
What's his status?
What's his status? 2 years in a row where BC looks like a pretty decent team, but then the quarterback injury looms over and proves to be tough to overcome. Last year, Nathan Rourke wasn't healthy. He was trying to come back from a injury that many thought was supposed to end his season, and we know how that ended for him. So
he had a marvelous end to his season because everything that he did was qualified.
Yeah.
Well, he's playing handicapped. He's playing injured.
Right. So there's only so much you can expect from your quarterback who's dealing with an injury like that. So I'm very curious to see how they work around that.
The good news is for CFL fans, of which we are, the good news is that there's going to be an opportunity for a quarterback out there who may not have the reputation yet of being a winner, who could rise up and be a winner, like we saw Chad Kelly last year. I mean, there is an opportunity with so many quarterbacks that that are not starters, but could be put in the position of starting because of the veterans that stand in front of them, who have been sometimes a bit of overrun by injuries. Like, take for example, just as an example, take Hamilton as an example. Bo Levi Mitchell, great quarterback. What an opportunity for him to reclaim the greatness that he built, in the last decade. Just imagine how great that would be for him. And then, to my point, imagine he gets hurt, and now you end up with Schultz there. To me, he's a guy I've respected and appreciated going back when he was with Adams in Montreal. I really, honestly, back then, I didn't put Adams ahead of Schultz. I didn't put Schultz that far ahead of Adams, but I liked Schultz better than Adams. I don't know why. I just did. I just liked his consistency better.
Well, we know that Adams had a lot to prove, certainly. And I think that's what it was, right? We want to see, can he do finally live up to that potential that many thought he could, right?
He can do it.
And the only reason, let's not forget, the main reason why he was there in the first place was because of the Nathan Rourke injury.
Yep.
And they decided to keep him around. But they also went out and got Dane Evans. Why did they go out and get Dane Evans? They didn't really need, like, that was a bit of a luxury move, but at the same time, now it's proven to be a needed move because you got a quarterback who's now injured or dealing with an injury. And so I'm wondering to myself here, it's like they got a real decision to have to make here because they can't. There's a, I want to say there's a lot right on the season, but this is a season here where
there is a lot riding on the season. I think you can say that.
Like, I think for BC, like, someone's got to unseat Winnipeg, and Winnipeg is probably the most beatable that they've been in this stretch. I still think that they're obviously the obvious favorites, but as what I think is, this is a team that you could see losing if the other team plays its cards right.
Absolutely. And the thing of it is, the important thing about BC, I love BC. I love what the new ownership has done there. I love the way they started last year with the concert and the excitement that they generated. And they've continued to try to generate it this year. The problem I have, and I think the the chink in their armor is how they played this last game against Calgary. That cannot sit well. That was at home. They lost like that at home. That can't sit well with the confidence of the team and or the fans. You're trying to build a fan base, right? And they've had a good couple of years, but they haven't really accomplished anything that says, we're champs, which unfortunately is what fans look for. Yeah, okay, or go to the Grey Cup. But they're the only ones who remember they went to nobody remembers who went to the Grey Cup, but the teams who do go there and lose, that people, fans and teams remember that. But they need to make the next step. And you're right, unseating Winnipeg is going to be a challenge. Not only do they have to do it, it's going to be a challenge. And now they made it tougher to get to play Winnipeg.
Yeah, right? I mean, what has Winnipeg had each and every year they've gone to the Grey Cup?
A healthy squad.
healthy squad, and we don't have to play an extra game. That extra game is so tough. I think people discount. Yep,
you're right.
What it means to have to play that game and then do it all again the week after. Right? I think people tend to overlook how difficult that turnaround truly can be.
Absolutely. So, well, here's hoping that BC works it out. We'll find out how it works again in a couple of weeks. We'll find out how ready they are to play, and the other thing that makes it hard for us to judge teams, David, is the seriousness with which a team plays a game, dependent on their place in the standings and how relevant the game is. You know what I mean? We got that. There's that issue too. So let's not get fooled by the fact that, it looked like a terrible loss for BC, but they clearly tipped their hand when they showed that they weren't really interested in this game anyway. Why else do see, we got tale of two different teams. You've got Toronto that won't take their starter out, and you got BC who takes their starter out by definition for most people, a lot of people, too soon. I mean, how do you decide to keep the guy in? And I think BC was playing for something, more than Toronto was, and that's the irony in my mind. Toronto's keeping their quarterback in, and this is to me, this is a risk reward thing that the Argos are doing, and BC's playing it safer, while Toronto is keeping Kelly in because they feel it's important. Dinwiddie and Kelly. My impression is from our conversations with them, reading between the lines, they both believe, and by Coach Dinwiddie and Kelly together believe that he has to play more because he just hasn't been a CFL quarterback that long, and he needs all the experience he can get. And on the other side, BC, they have a quarterback that's been in the league for a few years. Yes, hasn't had any experience in the Grey Cup, but he has been a starter for a longer time. So they feel it's less of a problem to sit him. I think that's the logic. I don't know what you think, but I think that's where it sits. Why you have two opposite views of the same situation.
I think the big one here is Ryan Dinwiddie has seen what happens when they give Chad Kelly time off. He's not looking as sharp, and it becomes apparent that, you know what, maybe we're overthinking this a little bit, and they don't necessarily have to play him all 4 quarters, but keep him engaged, keep him in a rhythm,
Yeah.
keep that not competitiveness, but keep that rhythm going, keep himself, in shape. And what I mean by in shape, I don't mean like he's physically out of shape, but being able to read the defense, being able to understand the play calls, keep that connection with the receivers, right?
Absolutely.
It's all important. It's all important. I will say, and because you're right here in that, last year was a different story. McLeod Beth Thompson it had so many games played under his belt. He could take that game off, right? But for Chad Kelly, he hasn't played that. This is his first full season as a starting quarterback since he was in college. He hasn't been in college for a long time, right? That's why he hasn't played a lot of football. He's got a lot of football in him. The concern is that he did suffer now an injury that they said he could play through, that they could bring him back, but had no reason to put him back in the game. That's the only thing you're concerned about. Guarding him from an injury.
His elbow looked a little tender. They checked his elbow.
His elbow, and I think his leg too, was
He
he
got smushed a little bit there.
He got
Ankle.
rolled. His ankle got rolled a little bit. He wasn't happy with that. And I mean, just seeing it, those are plays that I hate to see because that's an avoidable play. No reason for a defender to roll on an ankle. I think maybe he knew what he was doing a little bit there. So, yeah, like those are things that coaches have to always think about. But I think Ryan Dinwiddie every week is a learn. There's something he can learn. There's something he learns and something he knows he can do better.
Absolutely, and with that situation with Kelly, it is a risk, but it's one that they've decided to take, and we'll all find out how. There'll be second guessers depending on what happens in their playoff game or the Grey Cup if they're deemed worthy with a victory and move on to a Grey Cup. They're of course the favorite in the East, but I really do think they have some concerns. I think either Montreal or Hamilton could beat the Argos. I believe they could. If circumstances are right, they could beat them. Now, a lot of that is beating yourself and not taking your opposition seriously.
Right.
The Argos have, for the most part this year, a lot more than last year, have not fallen to the level of the play of the opposition, except for maybe the first half.
Yeah.
That's been the extent of them not playing to their own level and playing to the level of their opposition. But they've always, in the second half, come out and straighten things out. They did that consistently this year.
So the
So that isn't
question
an issue
is,
for
how much can you do that before it bites you back?
them. Well, that's the issue. That's the issue.
Right.
So I wanted to also talk about in Winnipeg for the first time 2 nationals. Um, we've got Dembski and we got Brady Oliveira, 1,000 yards receiving and 1,000 yards running. That's never happened before in the Canadian Football League with 2 nationals on the same team.
Same team.
Wow, you know what I mean? Like that's a run game with a bit of short passing going on. That's pretty amazing, and I think those 2 players highlight why Winnipeg is so good. The run game. They have. I mean, we've got Brady Oliveira challenging for the most yards ever. He's just behind John Cornish, one of the greatest running backs in Canadian Football League history, one of the beasts of recent generations, one that many of us know who that guy is and how good he was. And now we're looking at a guy who's competing with him. I mean, this is amazing. And it totally falls in line. I I see that and I read that and I go, yep, that's Brady Oliveira. That's him. And Dembski, a guy who quietly makes big plays for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, a guy who was playing in Saskatchewan and wanted to come back home, and guess what? He did. And they've done well because of those 2 players, David. Those are the guys that whoever plays them in the playoffs, they got to stop Dembski and Oliveira. And what those 2 guys have shown is they're unstoppable.
Well, look at what Winnipeg's done. They've had, it's the teams that have their Canadians step up and make big plays. I think of what happened with the Argos last year in the Grey Cup. Enoch Mwamba, Robbie Smith, obviously Boris Beatty. Like, having your Canadian guys make plays for you is what makes you win championships. And I think Winnipeg definitely has the best Canadians in the CFL. When you look at Dembski, when you look at Oliveira, when you look at just up and down their roster, that's why they're such a revered team. But they've done well in that regard. Now, can they do it in the crunch time? Right? They've had their moments where they've looked human, but yeah,
They
I do.
both played in the Grey Cup last year.
And this is the thing. This is a team that definitely won't make the same mistakes twice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the last time they were in Hamilton, they did win the Grey Cup. So they have that going for them. But yeah, it's impressive to see Canadians. We always say I was always good when John Cornish was doing a year in, year out. But to see 2 guys on the same team do it, as you said, it's just so incredible that those moments are
Amazing.
happening.
It's amazing. You're looking at history, folks. You're looking at something that people will be talking about for centuries. And then you've got the Argos with this young Canadian, while we're on that subject, Adebaboye. Holy mackerel. We saw something in him where his confidence to find the hole right away and the speed at which he ran through that hole was amazing. It's like a slingshot.
He's again, you know what? They're bringing him along slowly. He's had the perfect position to learn, right? He's played special teams, so that he's got the physicality to go to be a running back. But now he's starting to, next year, no Andrew Harris.
Hey, hold on a second. Maybe even this year. We don't know about Harris's
And
injury.
here's the thing,
right?
you know what? That's a good point, because we don't know what Andrew Harris's status is going to be, right? He's dealing with an injury. It's no guarantee he is back for the East semi, at least the East semifinal. But at the same time, it's like, boys look pretty good, right? I think you're going to see a lot of him in this in the season finale. I think it's going to be his. I think you're going to see a lot of him because they want to say, all right, see if you can earn yourself some snaps in the playoffs.
He's on special teams, so he can play on the team. Yeah. It doesn't take much to move over from special teams to a starter position or to end up on field. And the Argos are not afraid, and the players that they have are not afraid to hear the coach say, "Come in, we're going to
Yep.
send somebody out now. Okay, run your best, get off the field." Right, and they've done it with both their star running backs. One with a deep history, and another one that is now basically the feature back for the Argos. We know who that is, and it isn't the future Hall of Famer, but he has a part to play, and Harris will play a big part with the Argos. And one of the parts that he's playing, that regardless of his injury or not, if he's injured or not, he's still going to be a guy who the coach relies on as almost kind of a coach, right? Unofficial coach, right? So he's not getting paid to be a coach. He's a player. But dude's always got the clipboard in his hand, and he's always talking to the running backs when they come off the field.
Yeah. It's an important resource that he was like that last year too, until he eventually got back onto the field. It's important to have guys that have that camaraderie together and saying we're doing this together. It doesn't matter who's going to do it. We just have to go out and do our job.
Absolutely. So let's concentrate a little bit, since we're in the East. We'll stay in the East, and we'll talk about Hamilton and Montreal. These are two teams that they kind of I don't know, David. I really feel like there's something they're not telling me. I'm left with that feeling. I'm left with the feeling of Montreal's not telling me something. Hamilton's not telling me something. And I don't mean they can't tell me. I think they won't tell me. I think they're playing a little bit of that game where they don't want to show what they're going to do to against each other. And then they have the additional layer of the Argonauts. They don't want to tip their hand. So the Argonauts are ready for them if one of those teams, which team wins, right? So that's the thing that I don't think we've seen Hamilton, Montreal play at their best, even recently.
I think that, again, I do think that's a little bit by design. Teams tend to not go all the way out because, again, they want to leave a bit of mystery,
especially football,
like
more than any sport.
I'm curious to see how both teams handle this final game, because actually two things. Does Hamilton come back home? Because they're gonna have to go to Montreal. They're gonna come back home and go back to Montreal again. That's something to consider as well. But yeah, my thinking here is you're gonna see two teams that are gonna be like, you know what? Maybe we just look at the backups and say we might need you in the playoffs. Let's see if you guys can do something. I think that's where they're gonna go, unless they feel like one of their guys needs some reps. But
it's that decision, like you said, exactly. There may be players they need to play.
Yeah, I just think they're going to play this as safe as they can.
I think it's going to be it's going to be like the boxing match, the two fighters, the first couple of rounds. They're just sending little probes. They're not really trying to hit the guy. They're just trying, and they don't want to get knocked out. And so they're just checking out to see if there's any soft spots that they can work on later. I think, to your point, is the point you're trying to make, is that they will have a plan, but I think the only plan they're doing is not to expose what they're going to do, but what they can do to their opposition. That's the kind of game it's going to be. Basically, two boxers just feeling each other out. That's all that game's going to be. And therefore, they're going to be setting up a really interesting little battle, because you imagine emotionally what that's like for the players. All the players know that's who they're going to play. They show up on the field, and the coach says, "Okay, take it easy, lay back. Look, you rest, and you don't worry too much. I want to make sure you guys all stay healthy. We'll try a couple of things. We'll see how that works out. But it isn't going to be. This is one of those times. I don't care what anybody says. This is not a game either team's coming out to win. They're coming out to survive."
I do, yeah. No, I'm very curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, I do think it's going to be a little predetermined.
Absolutely. Any final word from you on this week? Next week we'll have somebody to talk about flag football.
Stay healthy.
Yeah, that's the key. And you know what? There's a few things that players are playing for. There's bonuses and that kind of thing. So those kind of things will be happening this week coming up. And we will probably hear about the odd one where a player will be disappointed because for some reason he doesn't get a chance to meet those targets. We're going to hear that as usual, but then we'll hear the ones that do make it. So it'll be fun. It'll be a fun week of football.
It definitely will be.
Thanks for doing this, David.
Thank you, Frank.
Much appreciated as usual. So for David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live on Mondays at 9 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. Please check out SpanglishWorld.ca and, of course, Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. I guess we're still here.
We're still here.
Hello? Is this thing working? Anyway, well,
I think Eduardo probably had to deal with something, but I mean, here's one thing I'll ask you. I had to fill in my ballot for the awards.
Okay.
They asked me to fill out a ballot. If you had to pick your top defensive player in the East, would you have a name in mind?
No, I haven't given it that much thought. That's a tough question. Well, the East, right? You're saying the East.
Next week, so this week I had to do the nominations for the Toronto side.
I think number 48 for the Argos.
Okay, so likely going to be him in terms of, I think everyone's voting that way. The question now I'm having is, is there anyone in the East that can challenge him? That's something I want to pose to you to think about for next week.
Yeah, there is.
Interesting. Okay,
The East,
who you come up with?
Former NFLer. Again with the Argos.
Okay, interesting.
You know who I mean?
Yeah, I know for sure.
Him because of the big plays that he makes. But this is defense, right? Now, I'm automatically going, I'm not talking linemen, which is kind of, guys, because, there's a few linemen out there in the East that would be a lot of fun to pick. Defensive linemen.
I think the East is a little trickier just because of how good the Argos have been, that it might be tough to vote against.
Yeah, only because, success breeds awards, right? Sometimes. There have been times when teams that win a lot of games don't get a lot of awards. That happens too. Mm-hmm. So, but I haven't given it any thought. And the only players I really key in, and unfairly, and it's unfair to the rest of the teams, is I follow the Argos, of course, because that's a team that we go to all the games and stuff like that. And I've watched firsthand the amazing nature of their games. And I'm trying to think in Montreal, there are some sack experts in Montreal that I think there's a couple of players in Montreal I'd like to point to. In Hamilton, you're not going to say Simone Lawrence because he hasn't been the kind of player that he has in the past. And as far as defense is concerned, they haven't had a really good year, consistently good year defensively. So how do you pick a defender out of that? It's kind of tough, right? So it's easy. Like, I think Montreal has a really good defense, has had a really good defense. I should look at some of the names because I know I'm forgetting people that I could mention.
Well, I think Eduardo's back, so I think we can
good.
Pin that for next week. But something to throw at you. And,
right.
And anybody watching the show, if you have someone you think, let me know.
Okay, Eduardo, we already did our goodbyes.